Psalm 5. To the chief musician. With flutes. A psalm of David. Lord, hear my words, consider my sighing. Pay attention to the voice of my cry, my King and my God. For to you I pray, Lord, in the morning you hear my voice, in the morning I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. For you are not a God who delights in wickedness, evil cannot dwell with you. The arrogant cannot stand in your presence, you hate all who do wrong. You destroy those who tell lies, the bloodthirsty and deceitful, you, Lord, detest. But I, by your great love, can come into your house, in reverence I bow down toward your holy temple. Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies, make your way straight before me. For there is no faithfulness in their mouths, their inmost thoughts are deceitful. Their throat is an open grave, they flatter with their tongues. Declare them guilty, O God. Let their intrigues be their downfall. Banish them for their many sins, for they have rebelled against you. But let all who take refuge in you be glad, let them ever sing for joy. Spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may rejoice in you. For surely, Lord, you bless the righteous, you surround them with your favor as with a shield. Reflection and prayer. Imagine yourself alone in the stillness of the night, where only the sound of your own heartbeat echoes. What would you do? Would you scream to be heard by someone who seems distant? This is exactly what the psalmist does. He raises his voice to the Creator, not with empty words, but with deep sighs, coming from a soul that needs to be heard. Like someone knocking at the door in the dark, he pleads, begging, Lord, hear my cry. Have you ever been in that position? Have you ever needed help so urgently that every second of silence felt unbearable? There is a unique intensity here. This is not a common prayer, but a plea that carries invisible tears. The psalmist knows that God hears even the most muffled groans, those that no one around us can understand. And that's why he does not give up calling, knowing that even when the heavens seem silent, God is attentive. This raises an important question. What if the answers we seek have already begun to take shape while we are still crying out? Can we perceive it? In this encounter between human weakness and divine greatness, invocation becomes an act of unbreakable faith. The psalmist does not just speak, he waits. And in that waiting, there is a precious lesson. Even the act of asking is a surrender. He knows that God is a faithful listener, someone who not only hears but also responds. The question is, are we ready to hear his answer when it finally comes? The psalmist does not wait for nightfall to seek God, he cries out at dawn, when the world awakens and the sunlight begins to touch the earth. It is in this silent and pure moment that he presents his plea. And you? How do you start your day? Is it with rush and worry, or with a moment of surrender and expectation? The psalmist's morning prayer is not just a formality, it is like a seed planted at the beginning of the day, eagerly awaiting its fruit. He prays, but not just to speak, he waits. There is a sacred expectation in his words, as if placing a request before the throne of God and silently observing the horizon, certain that the answer will come. What if each day began this way? Instead of worrying about what is to come, what if our first act was to trust that God is in control from dawn? Would we change the way we face daily challenges? This morning prayer is not an isolated act but an invitation for constant connection throughout the day. By surrendering his plea in the early hours of the morning, the psalmist teaches that the time we spend with God can shape the rest of our hours. And in the interval between request and response, he challenges us: will we be able to keep our hope alive? Will we have the patience to trust that, even when it seems nothing has changed, God is already at work? God is light, and in his presence, there is no space for shadows. The psalmist knows this and reverently declares that evil can never stand before him. Imagine for a moment, what happens to darkness when light is turned on? It disappears, leaving no trace. So it is before the holy character of God, every evil, lie, and injustice dissipates like vapor. And if he is so pure, what does that say about how we should approach him? Are we ready to strip away our masks and let him see us as we truly are? The wicked, those who insist on lies and injustice, find no refuge before God. It is not a matter of cruelty, but of incompatibility. God's holiness does not allow evil to dwell in his presence. It's like water and oil, which can never mix. But this fact also brings an implicit promise: if God cannot tolerate evil, he is also not indifferent to our pain and the injustices we face. Have you ever stopped to think that every time we cry out for justice, we are echoing the very heart of God? Knowing that God does not condone evil is a relief for those who seek refuge in him, but it is also a call to transformation. If we want to walk in his presence, we must leave behind what does not align with the light. This is not a burden, but an opportunity. God does not ask for perfection but for a heart willing to be shaped by his holiness. So, are we ready to abandon what pulls us away from him and allow ourselves to be filled with everything that is good? God is not indifferent to what is wicked. The psalmist states clearly, he detests evil, makes liars perish, and abhors the cruel. There is no room for moral neutrality before him. Imagine for a moment, how do you feel when you see an injustice being committed? When we witness wickedness, our souls cry out for justice. And if we, being imperfect, react this way, how much more the heart of God? His hatred of evil is an expression of his love for justice and truth. How does this transform us? Do we also reject what displeases him, or have we tolerated small shadows in our lives? This God who makes liars perish and abhors the cruel is the same God who extends mercy to those who repent. Evil is not ignored, and lies are not forgotten, but his justice is always balanced by grace. For those who cling to deceit, there is destruction, but for those who turn to him, there is redemption. This brings an important reflection: what are we cultivating within us? Are we aligned with the truth, or are we allowing lies and resentments to distance us from his presence? The rejection of evil is a demonstration of God's faithful and just character. He does not merely see what is wrong, he intervenes, separating what is pure from what is impure, what is true from what is deceitful. And this truth confronts us. Are we sincerely seeking transformation, or are we just trying to survive amid our imperfections? The great news is that God does not reject us because of our past, but for our insistence on not changing. The door is open, the question is, are we ready to enter and leave behind everything that separates us from him? The psalmist does not approach God as someone making a casual visit, but as someone aware of the greatness of the privilege of being in his presence. He recognizes that it is by divine goodness that he can enter the sanctuary, and therefore, he draws near with deep respect and reverence. Have you ever stopped to think about the value of this access? The Creator of the universe invites us to be with him, not because of our merit, but out of love. What if we treated every moment in his presence as a sacred audience? Entering the house of God is not just a religious act but a response of gratitude. The psalmist knows that he is not there by chance, it is God's goodness that has opened this door for him. And that changes everything. Instead of demanding blessings, he worships. Instead of approaching with pride, he kneels in humility. This invites us to reflect, how have we presented ourselves before God? Are we just seeking answers, or is our heart filled with gratitude for who He is? The psalmist's respect in the sanctuary reminds us that being in the house of God is much more than fulfilling a ritual. It is a transformative encounter. There, we are reminded of who we are and, above all, who He is, a kind God, yet worthy of reverence. And in the silence of the sanctuary, we find a space to be truthful, to drop our masks, and to allow Him to work within us. And so, when we enter His presence, have we left anything behind? Or do we carry burdens that He is ready to relieve if only we would hand them over to Him? The psalmist cries out for something essential, divine guidance. He knows that on his own, he cannot walk the right path, especially amid the enemies surrounding him. Asking God to guide his steps is more than a simple prayer, it is an act of trust. And you? How many times have we gotten lost in daily decisions because we tried to walk on our own? Recognizing that we need direction is admitting that we are not self-sufficient. And this is liberating. After all, who better to guide us than the one who sees the complete path, from beginning to end? The psalmist understands that justice is the north that aligns his steps with God's will. But following this path is not simple, especially when there are enemies nearby, whether they are external or internal. How many times have we felt pressured to stray from what is right out of fear or fatigue? Asking God to straighten the paths is asking not only for clarity but also for the courage to follow the truth, even when it seems difficult. And this is an important question: are we ready to obey God's direction, even if the path is narrow and challenging? There is a beauty in this request for guidance because it teaches us not to walk alone. When we allow God to lead us, each step becomes a journey of learning and growth. Even the obstacles and enemies we encounter along the way can be used by Him to strengthen us. What changes is not the absence of difficulties but the assurance that we are not lost. The question is, are we willing to set aside our own plans and trust that His way is always the best? The psalmist paints a clear and disturbing picture of the wicked. There is no sincerity in their words, and their hearts are steeped in evil. Their voices are seductive, but their intentions are treacherous, like poison hidden in honey. Who hasn't felt deceived by words that seemed sweet but turned out to be false? In a world where appearances deceive, it's easy to fall into the traps of empty rhetoric. This raises an important question: are we discerning the truth, or are we accepting words that merely comfort momentarily but lead us away from justice? These wicked people do not just speak lies, they live according to the corruption that poisons their hearts. The problem is not only in what they say but in what they are. Their actions reflect what they cultivate in secret, for what is within always overflows to the outside. The psalmist prompts us to reflect: what are we allowing to grow within us? Words can build bridges or raise walls, and the sincerity we choose to live impacts both ourselves and those around us. The wickedness of the unrighteous serves as a warning, not only about those who surround us but about the paths we may take if we are not careful. Deceptive words do not start from the outside, they can sprout from within us when we let pride and selfishness reign. That's why we need to constantly examine our own hearts and ask God to free us from being deceived by our own nature. After all, what testimony do our words leave? Do they reveal sincerity and light, or do they hide ulterior motives that distance us from the truth? The psalmist does not merely wish to rid himself of his enemies, he longs for something deeper, justice. He asks that the wicked be caught in their own snares, that the evil they plan against others return upon them. This prayer may sound harsh, but it carries a yearning for balance and order. After all, it is not right for those who spread evil to go unpunished. How many times do we see injustice prevail and wonder, how long? This plea reminds us that the desire for justice is etched in the human soul, it is part of the image of God within us. The psalmist cries out for the wicked to be brought down by their own plots, not out of vengeance, but so that their actions do not prevail. He understands that evil is self-destructive by nature. Whoever digs a trap for others will sooner or later fall into it themselves. This divine principle echoes throughout various passages. The path of lies and violence never leads to true peace. And you? How do we react when we see evil prosper? Do we have enough faith to believe that God's justice, even if it seems delayed in our eyes, never fails? Asking for the wicked to become victims of their own machinations is also a call for us to reflect on our own paths. Are we building bridges of peace or setting up situations that can ensnare us? Divine justice is not merely an external judgment, it is an opportunity for everyone, including us, to correct ourselves before we are consumed by our own shortcomings. In the end, trusting in God means believing that His justice will always come, even if the process is not immediate. And the question remains, are we willing to patiently wait for His justice, or will we be tempted to take matters into our own hands? There is a deep joy reserved for those who trust in God, a joy that does not depend on circumstances. The psalmist describes the righteous as people who rejoice, finding security and contentment under divine protection. It is not a fleeting happiness, but a state of inner peace, even amidst the storms of life. And this makes us reflect, where have we sought our joy? Have we placed our hope in fragile things that fade over time, or do we find shelter in the constancy of God, where true security is found? Trusting in God brings a joy that transcends logic. When everything around seems threatening, the righteous stand firm, knowing they are under superior care. This type of security is like an invisible shield. It may not eliminate battles, but it ensures that no blow will remove us from God's purpose. It is a joy that flourishes in the heart, even when the world seems to crumble. And here arises a powerful question: what prevents us from resting in this protection? Do we lack confidence that God is truly able to care for us? The righteous do not just experience protection, they live in the freedom of knowing they are guarded by an unchanging love. When we place our trust in God, we are freed from paralyzing fear and can enjoy the present with gratitude. Life then ceases to be a race for security and becomes a testimony to His goodness. Thus, amid all that we face, God invites us to make a daily choice, to live tormented by uncertainties or to rejoice in the certainty that He is always by our side. What do you choose? The psalmist concludes his reflection with a powerful image: God blesses the righteous and protects them with His benevolence, like a shield. God's blessing is not merely a reward for good deeds, it is the manifestation of grace that envelopes and guards those who trust in Him. It is a reminder that life is not devoid of challenges, but with God, every battle is faced with security. Just as a shield protects a warrior in the trenches, the presence of God protects us from life's assaults. Have you ever stopped to think? When we are covered by this divine protection, what can truly harm us. This shield is not only physical but also emotional and spiritual. It covers our thoughts, frees us from anxieties, and gives us peace amid chaos. In times of fear and uncertainty, knowing that we are guarded by God is a comfort that the world cannot offer. Imagine living each day aware of this protection. Having this certainty is walking with your head held high, knowing that we are not alone. The Lord's blessing is not just about material prosperity, but about the assurance that, whatever the season, His hand is upon us. Now, let's pray. If you can, close your eyes and open your heart. Lord, thank you for your goodness that surrounds us like a shield. Even when we don't understand the paths we are walking, we choose to trust that your protection never fails. Deliver us from the worries that try to steal our peace and strengthen us in the battles we face. Bless us, Lord, and cover our lives with your presence, for only in you do we find true security. Teach us to rest in you and to live with gratitude, knowing that we are under your constant care. May we feel your love guiding us with each step, and may our faith be renewed every day. Amen. Living under God's blessing and protection is both a privilege and an invitation. We do not have to face life alone. He offers us His love as a refuge and His grace as a source of renewal. By understanding that we are guarded by Him, we learn to face every challenge with courage, knowing that there is an invisible shield surrounding us. The world may be uncertain, but our future in God is secure. And this changes everything. It changes how we act, how we think, and how we confront difficulties. If this message has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. In this way, you help spread hope and encourage others to find the same security and peace that is in God. May He continue to bless your life and guide each of your steps.